Welcome to today's Research Business Daily Report, where we have a bit of news from CASRO's Technology and Innovation event about the organization, and then an explanation of what a polling expert is telling media members when they question the reliability of election polling. RBDR is sponsored today and all this week by Nuance, offering multi-language verbatim coding services that help their clients quantify the meaning of open-ended answers. Nuance is a decision analyst company. And at the end of today's video, we're going to refer you to a link that will give you a great deal of information about coding, information that I know you will find very valuable. I've been attending CASRO's Innovation and Technology event in New York this week, and I came away with a bit of news about the organization. Diane Bowers, for 37 years, the president of CASRO, confirmed the rumor that she will be retiring this December. And she also told me that the CASRO-MRA merger is progressing. There will be a special meeting for CASRO in the next couple of weeks to discuss it. And if and when the merger is completed, David Almy, who currently heads MRA, will take over and head the entire merged organization. Next, one of the opening presentations here was by Pew Research Center's Director of Surveys, Courtney Kennedy. Now, she went into great detail in her presentation about what is working and not working with telephone polling and online polling. But she had what was perhaps a throwaway opening comment when she said that she regularly is fielding queries from the media about the reliability of election polling. And that got my attention, so I asked her to share what she feels confident enough to tell members of the media about polling. So what do you tell the media when they ask you that question?
Well, frankly, I'm glad that the primary and caucus season is over, because those elections are much more harder to poll accurately than a general election, and that's largely because the turnout rate is so much lower in primaries and caucuses. It forces the pollster to have to not only collect a representative sample, but then model what that likely electorate's going to be and which groups within the electorate are going to turn out at which rate, and that's quite difficult. And we don't have complexities on nearly that level in a general election, so it's a much easier task.
So you're saying you have to dig a lot deeper into the sample, because I guess one of the key questions is, are you going to vote? And you can't just rely on them to say yes or no. You have to actually study it a little bit more deeply than that.
That's absolutely true. It's actually very difficult to try to predict whether someone's going to turn out and actually vote or not. It's more simple than just asking a straightforward question. Some people might want to say that they're going to vote because it sounds socially desirable, but in fact they might actually not make it out to the polls.
I was watching the HBO movie on Lyndon Johnson. I don't know if you've seen it.
Heard of it. Bryan Cranston.
It's really interesting. But one of the points they make, and I'm old enough to remember the election, but I didn't remember this, is that the famous nuclear bomb or atomic bomb ad that only ran once, ran only a month before the election, and the election was pretty close to then. So I guess my question for you is, as we look ahead at the election season, is the public as sensitive to things, as far as you can tell, as apparently they were back then, to one thing that could happen? I mean, you look at all the things that Trump has said so far that, normally can get him basically out of people's choice, but it hasn't stopped people so far.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think there's two things going on. We've obviously seen that the American public is very polarized. A lot of people are pretty hardcore, consistently Republican, and a lot of people are consistently liberal, Democratic on the other side. So you have that, which suggests that there's not a lot of middle ground, or that events, campaign ads like that would not have much of an effect. But I still think there are some independent voters. Both of the candidates this year are highly unpopular, which means that a lot of people, I think, are interested in looking potentially for an alternative, or haven't made up their minds necessarily because they don't like the candidates that much. So I do think there's absolutely a risk that some real-world event, some special media event could tip the scale. That could absolutely happen.
Okay. You really got into the weeds about trying to get a proper sample of Hispanic voters and African-American voters and just non-white voters in particular. But are the differences in polling and what needs to be done here all that different from what we see around the rest of the world? Because they've been having bigger problems, I think, more black eyes than even we have.
Yes, I think that's right. It's really, polling is in a state of transition all across the world. And I think in Europe you've seen some pretty high-profile polling misses. And in some instances, at least, that's because every single one of the pollsters was using online methodology. And that doesn't necessarily mean why it was a polling mistake, but you didn't have as much diversity as we have in the United States. In the United States, you do still have quite a lot of phone polls going on. You even have some mail polling occasionally. And the more methods that are in place, I think, reduce the risk that the polls are going to systematically and consistently get it wrong.
Okay, and the last thing, in your presentation, you showed that one of the samplers that you had, sample I, you called it,
yep,
performed far more admirably than the others did.
Yes.
Did that surprise you?
It did. Although, having read the new scientific literature that's out on non-probability surveys, you do see that line of methodology is getting better. So from one perspective, maybe it shouldn't have been such a surprise. But yeah, it really stood out too much. Not so much that they performed well, but there was quite a gap between first and second. It was clear that this one company had developed a methodology that I would say was head and shoulders above the other players in the online non-probability space at this time.
Our thanks to Courtney for sharing that information with us. I hope you'll find it as interesting as I did. That's your Research Business Daily Report. We've been sponsored and will be all this week by Nuance, offering multi-language verbatim coding services that help their clients quantify the meaning of open-ended answers. Nuance is a decision analyst company, and they are giving information to us to pass on to you about coding. It's a field that probably not many of our viewers have a great deal of information about, and yet it is pretty important, even more so these days than in the past. 30-year market research veteran Lisa Hazen leads the Nuance Group, and her team of quality-driven coders at Nuance are available to lead you through the maze of coding considerations. And Lisa has, as I've mentioned, posted a think piece about choosing a coding partner, and we are linking to it. Nuance has helped many research organizations since it was launched only a few years ago. So look for the link in today's email, and it's also in the description box underneath today's video. We hope you have a great research day, and we'll look forward to seeing you back here on Friday.